we found that these businesses, because their people are so valuable, we would start to do things like, hey, how about we rewrite your job description so they start from a place of purpose and values? How about we help you and coach you through the interview process so that you're looking for not only the skills that can do the job, but actually the right persona fit that will align with your culture. And what we found is we could spend $1 in that arena and it would 10x the return.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Small Business Mentor podcast, where we shine a light on the black holes of business growth with your host, Alan Pence. In each episode, we explore the leaps and bounds entrepreneurs make as they push their businesses beyond the 1 million mark into the realm of professional sustainable growth. Stay with us as we navigate the journey from brute force to finesse.
All right. Today on the podcast, we have Shawn Busse, who is the owner of Kinesis marketing company out in Portland, Oregon. So welcome, Shawn, to the podcast. Hope the weather out there is getting good for the summer.
We get 4 months to offset the 8 months of depression and anxiety that we get from all the rain. Yeah.
Well, in DC, we're having a beautiful midsummer day. It's like no humidity, so we will pay for this by the universe will come back and make it stiflingly humid for longer. Shawn, so tell us a little bit about Kinesis and what you guys do.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Alan. It's good to be here, and I love reading your content on LinkedIn. It's some great guidance and advice. So Kinesis, we started in 2000, and I was at the ripe old age of 28, and like a lot of entrepreneurs, sort of faked it till I made it kind of situation. Started out as what I would say a brand and design shop. Largely our customer base were in-house marketers, and they would come to us wanting really to impress their bosses. I mean, at the end of the day, they would do stuff like new websites and logos and brands, as a way to demonstrate that they were adding value. And Kinesis served that market for many years and got a lot of customers through SEO as kind of a way to get those customers, and eventually transitioned away from being the servicer of marketers to becoming an outsourced marketing department. And we implemented that model right around 2010 and ran with that for, just pure outsourced marketing department for about 7 years and grew a lot. There was a tremendous demand for it. And then I'd say in the last, 7-8 years or so, we've really shifted from just kind of pure outsourced marketing to much more of a business strategy and consulting firm. So now we cross the realm from marketing into culture and recruiting and business model. So what is it you're selling? How do you sell it? Who do you sell to? How do you price it? And in many ways, up-leveling from just the marketing department to much more of a business model and process. Yeah.
Like the word marketing is like one of the most dangerous words in business, I feel like, because it just doesn't mean much. Okay, so you said in the course of that, I think you've hit every single meaning of marketing almost, right? So some people think it's just a brand, some people think it's lead generation, and some people think, like if you go read Scaling Up or Traction, they think it's basically who your customers are in your business strategy, right? And so those are kind of the three versions of the company you've run, right?
I think, like many of us, we start running a business and our perspective is like this, when we first start, and then as we grow and we get kind of more information and we meet more people and we learn more. And, I was, really fortunate. I went through the EO Accelerator program in the middle of the Great Recession, which was such a blessing, because I basically had a broken business model that was delivering stuff, marketing stuff to people, and for which there was massive competition, everything from outsourcing to the Philippines to, bespoke fancy pants branding agencies. And, and through that program, it helped me realize that, to your point, marketing meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and helping people figure that out was really important, like what they actually needed in that spectrum. And so I had Alan, I had a website. I don't know if profanity is allowed on this podcast or not. It literally said, fuck marketing, like on the homepage. And we were a marketing firm. And okay, it didn't use the word FUCK. It, exclamation point, pound sign, that was one of our most successful websites we'd ever built. And I think I finally figured out like that the pain that owners were feeling around marketing, which is, I want to grow. Marketing is how you do that, right? And that wasn't happening for them. So that
was the shift into being an outsourced marketing function.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
And so, what did you actually end up doing for them? Like, what services were under that?
I like to say we were a Trojan horse model. So people would come to us and say, hey, I want a new website, or I want a new logo, or I want a new brand. But now, instead of selling to the marketer, we were selling to the owner. And the reason we made that switch was that in the recession, everybody fired their marketer. Like that industry got decimated. And I was like, well, why would you fire your marketer if you're trying to grow, right? If you're trying to offset this terrible recession, why is your first fire your marketer? And that's when I realized people didn't really have a good grasp of what marketing was, what it should do. And they were hiring marketers who actually probably didn't service them very well. And there's a whole, like, I could do like a doctoral thesis on why marketing is so broken for small businesses. But the really short answer is most marketers, if they get training at all, have been trained on consumer brands. And they've been trained on huge consumer brands like Nike and Red Bull and et cetera, et cetera. And so this fresh-faced marketer gets hired into a small business. And if they're in B2B, they're in real trouble because they've gotten zero training in how to do that. And so then the first thing they do is they say, we should have a Facebook page, even though it may or may not actually be relevant whatsoever. And so I realized this massive disconnect between what is being taught as marketing and what is being needed as marketing, especially in B2B, in service-based businesses, huge gulf. And that's just one of probably 5 major problems that have created a real dysfunction with marketing, and why it's probably the number one frustration on any podcast that's about a small business. They're like, I'm frustrated.
Well, there's that old John Wanamaker line, right? That I know that half my marketing is wasted. I just don't know which half. But I think what you're saying is what I felt is like, oh, I know which half. It's both halves, and they both are a waste of money. And I always know the website rebrand is going to be Trojan horse in there somehow, right? So even though we don't sell anything on our website. So tell me a little bit about what you guys did to break that during that phase.
The first thing we did was we were just honest about it. Is we would talk to owners and say, hey, I bet you this is what happened to you leading up to the recession. So we're talking like 2012 now, right? And we're talking to an owner about like, let me guess, you tried some marketing stuff. Maybe you hired a marketer, you fired them in the recession. You can't really point to anything that they did or the work that you bought earlier and say that helped transform our business. Is that fair? And almost always they would say yes. So I would tap into that frustration. I'd say, here's why. It's not the marketer's fault. It's not your fault. It's the industry and the way it's structured is totally broken for you. And I would talk about things like coming out of school and being taught the wrong thing. Or I'd talk about the administrative assistant who really liked to do marketing and got promoted into the role, that dynamic. And I'd say like, okay, so you got all those problems going on. And then in my career, which started in 2000, marketing has gone from 5 channels, print, TV, radio, direct mail, maybe PR, maybe 5 or 6 channels to hundreds of channels. So it's gotten infinitely more complex, and nobody's sent that memo to you that it's gotten so much harder. And the system is designed to fill marketing positions within corporate America. So those two forces are crashing down on you and why it's not working for you. So once I would expose that reality, they'd be like, that makes so much sense. And it wasn't like I was like selling them snake oil. I was just like, this is what's going on. And this is why you're so freaking frustrated. And nobody has figured this out. Like, it's weird. It's almost like you're telling people about gravity and they're like, oh yeah, right. It's here. It's real. But I just think people hadn't really thought about it in that way. And the reason I knew it so well is that I had been part of that whole system. My customer were these marketers who were not that good. No fault of theirs generally. And they were hiring me. And when I said to look good, they literally were hiring me to look good. Like if I delivered an amazing rebrand and renamed the company and built a new website for a year or two, that person looked really good, but what they were riding on was the kind of general momentum of the business. The business was doing fine. And so the work they did probably helped out a little bit. But the underlying forces were what was elevating the business up, not their rebranding and so forth. And so it felt good. It looked good. It was reinforced. Their friends would say, oh my God, your new website's so good. But at the end of the day, I don't know that it was transformational. And so once things got hard, and this gets into the other problem with the in-house marketer, once things got hard, the owner would look at the marketer and think, what is that person doing that's going to help us with this hard situation? And this is where the owner owns some responsibility for the dynamic, is that they would marginalize that person as like a doer of things, not as a strategic partner. And they wouldn't let them in on conversations about the vision for the business. So they really never had the opportunity to really steer the vision of the business and to align with the owner on that. So that marginalization was a problem too.
And one of the things I always sensed was, okay, every business, every kind of industry vertical, maybe not every business, but for industries, have different marketing techniques, tactics that work, right? So, in my business, like right now in my phase of and actually within the phases of the business, they have different things that work, right? So some people sell through their website, so they need SEO. Some people are socially driven companies. Some people like me are, it's a lot of actual one-on-one talking to, we actually do a lot of teaming. So we're actually talking to other companies to team to work for the government. And, other companies do X, Y, Z. So like, how does a marketing agency come in? First of all, you got to diagnose what are the tactics that work, because they're not all the same. And then second, you got to be able to do them all. Right. So like that seems to be like a real problem for a general.
That's a real problem. Agency. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a problem not only for the in-house marketer, because of what their background is may not align with what the business needs.
And likely they got into it because they're like, hey, I love this pictorial thing with like building beautiful logos and sites. And it's like, now but your actual job is like this. It reminds me of the Warren Buffett thing where he's like, you got promoted as a CEO because you're really good at sales or you're really good at finance. And now your job is like actually capital allocation across the industry, and you weren't trained for that. So it's like the marketer's like, hey, I was supposed to be doing cool websites, and now you're asking me like, how do we get customers? Like, that's not what my job is.
The other day, I was in a call with somebody, really delightful gentleman. He's grown his business really, really quickly. But as I see a lot with fast growth, like the cracks are starting to appear. And he was talking about somebody on his leadership team and talking about them as a marketer in one breath, and then a later breath saying brand strategist. And I was like, that's interesting. Those can be the same, or it can be adjacencies. But then I went and looked at the person's experience online, and like most of their career, they've been a graphic designer. And in my experience, and I have employed a lot of graphic designers over the years, a tiny, tiny, tiny percent of graphic designers make good brand strategists, like tiny, maybe 5%, 2%. And of that percent that are actually marketers in terms of I'm a CMO. My job is to drive revenue. It's to make the business, thrive and grow. I almost know zero. And because they're just very different skills, and so that is a graphic designer and a brand strategist and a marketer. And so here's a person who's doing very well, very successful as a business. And I don't think he quite knows all the differences of these different types of personas. So it's tricky. It's really hard. I mean, I empathize with owners because the memo has not gone out to them that this discipline is far more complicated than they realize. And from industry to industry, to your point, there are some industries where like the website just needs to be purchase affirmation. Like it needs to basically, that's probably for your business. That's probably your business. It's purchase affirmation. It can't look like shit. It needs to align with what you're saying to the customers. It needs to tell them they've made a good decision, but it's not driving new leads to the top of the funnel. And there are other businesses where it really needs to do that, and I don't think owners know like what those different things are. Yeah.
So how did you manage this? You're going to have a variety of clients unless you're going to go real industry specific, right? How did you manage all the different competencies you would need to have?
We had to say no. Like we had to say no to certain broad swaths of business because they take a different discipline that we don't have. And so we've said no to any kind of e-commerce. If you're B2C e-commerce, that's its own really rigorous discipline that requires everything from search engine optimization to revenue conversion to, checkout process. Those are all very disciplined things, right? And then if you layer on top of that, let's say you have in-store product, there's point of purchase. Like I just recognize there's a whole discipline there. It takes a really smart person, maybe their entire career to master. And we've not spent energy on that. So why do that? So we said no to that. We've said no to mostly, like a business that's highly transactional, so like a commodity type of a business. If you're selling steel to steel fabrication shops and it's price per pound, probably not going to be us. So that leaves us with B2B, for businesses selling to businesses, low volume, high value transactions. So if you sell something that's worth a lot and probably has really good margin behind it, we know that buying process, or we know versions of that buying process. It's going to be different. If you're an engineering firm, that's going to be maybe a little different than, say a consulting firm. But any kind of B2B high value transaction process where people really matter, like the people on your team are the kind of the core to your success. We're really good in that arena. So we're not doing any work with Nike. We're not doing any work with Adidas, both of which have huge presence here in Portland. And if you look at an agency, if you look at almost all agencies in town, you will see those kinds of brands on their page, on their web pages. And I maintain that if they are a shop of 20 people, there is no way they are very, very good at that work and very, very good at the work we do. It's just, you can't staff for all that.
So then in this B2B kind of sounds like service kind of companies, are they mostly professional service, or do you do like software or, things like that too?
Yeah, mostly like some of our best clients, I have an automation engineering firm. So they're like designing and building robots. We've done really great work in the automation space, probably one of our favorite sectors to be in. It's growing. It's, everybody's trying to replace humans with robots. We have done really good work in what I call the built environment. So engineers who are designing the mechanical systems and controls that run a building. That's a complex, hard problem to solve. You're selling to various different constituents. You're selling to architects. You're selling to municipalities. You're selling to building owners. So the complex sales process, we really like that, because a complex sales process requires us. Yeah.
What kind of tactics work in those sort of verticals?
A couple things are sort of core to, I'd say, our approach. It starts often with sort of brand positioning. How are you meaningfully different than the rest of the market? And I think a lot of people underestimate how hard that is to do and how important it is. So You get a lot of Me Tooism in this space, a lot of companies that like emulate one another. So we start with that kind of space, like what makes you remarkable, or as I like to say, why are you worth paying attention to? And a lot of people will be like, well, we do this and we do this and we do this. And I'm like, well, those last three things you just said are the same things your competition does. And so the hard work is usually uncovering what's meaningfully different and giving that shape. We have a process called the proprietary way, which is a combination of people, talent, process, methodology that we package. And so we have our clients sell as the service. We say like, yeah, we do automation engineering, but this is our way of doing it and really making it different than the rest of the industry. So that's one good example of that. Yeah.
You say that you were doing outsourced marketing and now you've moved in. So there was a distinct phase where that was being done, and now you've moved into more like corporate strategy. Is that how you characterize it?
So outsourced marketing, and that was a bit of a Trojan horse to start doing culture work. So we found that these businesses, because their people are so valuable, we would start to do things like, hey, how about we rewrite your job description so they start from a place of purpose and values? How about we help you and coach you through the interview process so that you're looking for not only the skills that can do the job, but actually the right persona fit that will align with your culture. And what we found is we could spend $1 in that arena and it would 10x the return. And we could spend $1 in marketing and we might be lucky to do 1.2, 1.5. So in terms of like capital allocation, we discovered really fast, really early on, this is like 2012, wow, if we bring like a sense of purpose and meaning and vision and values into hiring, we can transform the business. You know, we can make it radically different in a short period of time. You know, like I had a 35-person company doing commercial HVAC work. They had almost 50% turnover. And within 2 years, we got that down to 4%. And the business results of that way outstripped. You could have been the world's best marketer. And I promise you couldn't have beaten the performance we got from doing that work. It was crazy.
Another point I didn't make earlier is a lot of marketing. So the digital, is better, but a lot of marketing is just not measurable, right? And a lot of brand kind of stuff. And, obviously right there, you're talking like when you first started talking about, the culture, and I'm like, okay, well, that's a little squishy, right? But the reality is you can show the 100% the ROI by showing the reduction in turnover, right? That's amazing.
That's the real obvious level. The less obvious level, the stuff that is really anecdotal but powerful too, is we just got the best engineer in the region applied for a job with us, and we didn't even have an opening, and he has a good job already, right? Like the quality of applicants applying for the work because the brand presence, the remarkability is something worth paying attention to. I have a client, they're in automation engineering. I would say a starting salary is probably $100,000. We took them from 8 employees to 32 employees in 4 years. And we paid $0 in recruiters, like no recruiting fees. And we did that all with brand, social, employee marketing, positioning, remarkability. Like it was a brand play. So I can't measure the value of the quality of candidates that were coming in the door, but these were like crazy talented people leaving good jobs to come to work for them, and with no recruiting, like not a dime. So if I say, let's measure the recruiting impact, it's $750,000 saved, right? Over 4 years. So you can pay that if you want, but I win. Like in terms of like our approach,
Was that driven a lot through LinkedIn kind of thing?
A lot of social marketing through LinkedIn, a lot of like video, sort of showing the core of the company and what it stood for. A lot of Instagram, towards more recently, some TikTok, stuff that like we don't normally touch.
I'm not allowed to be on TikTok, Shawn. I actually had to sign something with the government. Like if you use your device for government stuff, you're not allowed to have TikTok. So I have to hear it from my kids.
I think, Alan, like for me, those experiences, which took place over, 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years sometimes, it's really helped me see that there's like a combination of left brain, right brain. Like the measurable stuff, the left brain stuff is like retention rate, how fast you can fill a job. And then the less measurable stuff is like, this engineer is like one of the top 10 in the country in this domain, and he or she wants to work with us. What's the value? I don't know, but it's going to be something crazy.
Well, I just thinking about it for my business. I mean, might be talking to you after this, but I remember when we were in, you spoke to a mastermind group I was part of through Greg Crabtree, and you were doing a few things, I guess you are still, but when I heard you talking about the employee retention, employee attraction kind of stuff, I was like, that's it. Because I mean, it takes 30 years to make a 30-year-old, right? And we're not making enough of them. So there's only a certain amount of employees. And I think about, I mean, half my business is recruiting. And the easier you make that, I mean, the return is huge for us. And we get very unique, special snowflakes that we have to get for the government. And yeah, I mean, the ability to attract them more easily can win you a contract, basically. Yeah, so that's awesome. So I love hearing that. And just on that, like, let's drill down. I hadn't intended to talk about that, but like, what do you think is the differentiator? To some extent, it's probably going to depend on the community you're targeting, right? Engineers are going to be different than marketers and finance people. But is it basically the stuff that you hear? Like, I guess it's basically telling your story, right? And attracting the right people. But are there certain things that you've noticed that are more universally true about generations or about the current workforce or those kinds of things?
I think we are on a, you might call it like a market maturity ramp for employee engagement. And it's a lot like what I saw in marketing, right? In the early days, it was like, well, do you have a business card? Yeah, I have a business card. Do you have a website? Well, not yet, but I've got these business cards. And then, okay, you have a website. Does your website look like crap? Well, it's fine. No, it looks like crap. Okay, now you have a good looking website. So I'm seeing that I've watched that happen where in the beginning days, it was like, you're lucky to have a job with me, Alan. Like that was the attitude. I'm a Gen Xer, and I was told that I'm privileged to be able to work for somebody, and I should be thankful every day. To now, it's much more of an equitable relationship where I think employers have finally started to realize, like, yeah, actually it matters that we're fair and good to our employees, and employees have said, I expect to be treated fairly and like an adult, So I think in that more equitable environment, then it becomes more about a pull strategy where you are painting a picture for what it's really like to work here. And that's authentic and different. And I think the market has matured closer to that space. So now I see many more websites that will actually talk about what the company values are, or what we stand for, or what our vision is. The maturity that has to happen in that arena is that a lot of people are kind of speaking me too, right? Our values are integrity, excellence, customer service. Like, well, maybe, and so a better, like a 2.0 version of values, I think is often a big opportunity. And then the other piece of it is like, this goes for customers as well as employees, is that you gotta show what makes you really different. Like, it's a room full of horses and you got to look like a zebra. You can't just be like a slightly browner horse, like you got to be. And so I think to do that with employee engagement actually takes a lot more work than people think. I think they think, well, I'll just give that to the HR person and she'll do it. Or maybe the HR and the marketing person, and they'll do it. It's like, but it's so tied into your business model. I'll give you an example. So that client that we grew from 8 to 32, automation engineering. The problem with automation engineering is that every job they get almost exclusively will have an NDA associated with it. They can't talk about the work they do, which is tough when you want to be in marketing or in employee recruiting. You cannot talk about the work. And so we figured out, okay, this is a challenge. Let's figure out how to do it. It's the same challenge every automation engineering firm is going to have. And so we set about basically doing experiments, like internal R&D projects that were really fun and interesting. And then we started marketing those, right? Like, hey, this is cool. Let's use an industrial robot with a high-speed cutter on the end, which is scary, spinning at 20,000 RPM, and we're going to cut a pumpkin for Halloween. Like, we're going to like carve it, So like showing like, whoa, I didn't know we could do that, with a robot. And so like showing those stories, and that became part of their process. And so now they're like showing these experiments, not only to customers, but also to employees. Like, this is what it's like here. This is what a day is like working at Loop. That's the name of the company. So, that's more than giving it to the HR person to write a better job description, right? That's a process decision. This is why we got into business model and, kind of the things the business does on a day-to-day basis. Are we a company of exploration and research and development? Yeah, we are. Okay, let's make that public. Let's dedicate resources and people to doing that. So while we save them $750,000 on recruiting fees, they're probably spending several hundreds of thousands of dollars cutting up pumpkins and other things that other engineering firms will look at and go, hey, our utilization rate, which is like the amount of labor being billed, is below 90%. Oh my God, stop that. Don't carve up the pumpkins, get back to work, right? So they are giving up some billable income, but they're getting things that are probably hard to measure and invaluable from it.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. I love that. It would be interesting. I mean, we got a stat from my business the other day that we have to review 134 resumes for each hire on average. I mean, that's insane. Now, some of that is like super cursory, right? It's like comes into a mailbox and but it just feels like the better you can match, and people are going to use AI for this 100%. The better you can match, just the more efficient, it becomes. So, tracking the better resume and having them stand out somehow is probably the future we're going to go toward.
Well, just one last comment on that. A lot of times people will see these like really fancy companies we work for, like, well, gosh, yeah, sure. You pay your people, $150,000. You can put energy into that. It's like, it also worked for that HVAC company. Like that strategy that I talked about, it was a different play. Like we did different things, but it worked for a blue collar job. Like that act of getting to your essence and showing it, and pulling people towards the business as opposed to pushing the job description onto the marketplace. It works across different industries, at least in the B2B space that we operate in.
So let's talk. So one of the things that I'd heard you on Lauren Feldman's podcast, 21 Hats, you had talked a little bit about kind of going back to some of the tactics here, right? But the state of SEO and a little bit of the state of social and how that's really been changing, and that's going to have pretty profound impacts on marketing going forward. So talk a little bit about like what your experience has been over the years with SEO.
Sometimes I'm a little hard on the digital marketing folks, and I hope they accept my love. But I mostly am on this crusade because I care about business owners a lot. Like I really, really care about entrepreneurs. I think they need as much help as they can get because the landscape is changing so fast. And so for perspective, in 2004, we started experimenting with something that at the time was called article marketing, which is you write an article and then you put it out there on the internet on a variety of sites. And over time, not that long a period of time, we managed to like figure out how to get our website to like the top page of Google and the top spot. And in hindsight, what we were doing was SEO, and we got better and better at it. And in 2004 to 2000, I'd say probably 9, we were like lords of the universe in SEO. And as that market started to mature, I started to see it like getting more and more competitive, and but I was still getting tons of new business through this, like what seemed like free business, right? Write an article, put it out there. We'd write things like how to build a website in 2008, or 10 tips to do this about marketing, right? So we were really good at it, and what I started to see happening though was like, it was like slowly these like sponsored links were starting to come into the universe, and the competition for the top spot was getting fiercer and fiercer, and holding on to the top spot was getting harder and harder. And we kept it going for quite a while. We had a good run, maybe 10-year run or so of it. And finally I was like, you know what? The trajectory of this is towards commercialization. It's moving to a pay to play model. And I think there are better ways to deploy our resources and money and time. And it's getting to become a red ocean, of competition. So we started to just take our foot off the gas of SEO and moved into other arenas. And ever since then, I've sort of been like kind of pounding the table saying, I think this is a declining space in terms of dollars in to dollars out. And the agencies and the entire marketing ecosystem for digital marketing is really structured to keep the foot on the gas pedal, partly because the incentives are wrong. They're incentivized to place more ads and more effort because that's how they make their money. They're not incentivized by looking at your P&L, which is unfortunate. It would be really cool if they were. But so I just saw that the declining efficacy, like all marketing stuff does this. It goes through a peak and then a valley. And, at one point it was Yellow Pages ads, right? It was like, oh yeah, you better be in the Yellow Pages, right? So I think SEO is on its decline, and you're going to have to spend more and more money to get less and less results.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously AI is, if you go look at Perplexity AI these days, I mean, I basically stopped using Google search. I use that now.
Oh, tell me about that.
And,
yeah. What's that experience been like?
So that's one of these new startups.
Yeah.
And basically what they're doing is, what Google's been moving toward, which is they just give you the answer, right? And then they'll give you the links at the top to the articles or websites that they got the data from. But I mean, my click-through rate to that is like 1 in 1,000. Most of the time, I'm just trying to get an answer, and I don't really want to go to a website. And so, now what Perplexity is going to do is they'll become default, and then they'll put in ads, right? And then those ads will become valuable, just like Google did. But the question you have to come to is like, who's going to keep creating the content? Because like, why you're not getting rewarded for creating the content anymore? Because 1 in 1,000, that doesn't feel like it's a very very powerful model going forward. So I think we're going to see what you're saying is like this long, slow kind of degradation of SEO. I think is going to very quickly. I'm obviously an early adopter, but I was an early adopter of Google too, and now they're everything. So
you just articulate exactly the dynamic that I've been concerned about, is especially.
Yeah. And I think you see the same thing with social, right?
Yep.
And so what I tend to see is the social, I guess it's the social networks, but almost any kind of service in this area, including Google, is they come up with a way to get attention, right? And then so like LinkedIn right now has a lot of people are having success with, I think they have like an author kind of program where they're trying to get people to write longer, more in-depth stuff. And they're really pushing that in the algorithm, because that's what they've seen. Like, so I interviewed a guy the other week who's talking about it, and he's saying, like they saw TikTok and the amount of engagement on TikTok. So now everybody's trying to do that, right? So they build this program, and you can do really well on it organically right now because the algorithm wants it. But as soon as they've got what they want, then they start ratcheting it to get you to pay, which, sounds conspiratorial, but that's a business, right? And so no shade on them. It's their private property. And, but what we've got to realize is just building on these rented ground is just not a way to build a sustainable business. And I guess the reality is SEO just lasted a lot longer than most of these others did.
And the ecosystem behind SEO is so powerful. It's agencies, it's consultants, it's Google, and owners, poor owners, they'll go to a workshop and they'll get this message of like, yo, you got to have a digital strategy and here's what it looks like. And it's like, that was a great strategy 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 7 years, whatever. And it still kind of works. But have you read anything Cory Doctorow's put out? Kind of loosely, the enshittification of everything. I think his thesis on this case is so tight, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's how things start out good. They create a marketplace. People flood into it. They get a lot of value from it as a consumer. Remember, like Google used to be a really great search engine. It's total garbage now. I mean, it's just like garbage and all commoditized. It's all about selling, and so you don't discover those gems of websites that really add a lot of value to you. So that's happening on search. It's going to happen or has happened on social. And then TikTok. Then there's the TikTokification of everything, which you're describing, where the platforms are incentivized for engagement, which means random new stuff in front of you all the time and not necessarily thought leadership and followers. So that's another piece that the CEO of Patreon talked about at South by Southwest, of the demise of the follower, and the TikTok algorithm is encouraging that.
Interesting, because you see, like, that's sort of like the trend, right? Like, I just saw like Substacks going through that too, where they're going from the subscriber to the follower, and then it's going to eventually be the engager, right? So given that, what do you think the answer is? So one is stay with the algorithm, right? Just get really, really damn good at doing what the algorithm wants you to do, and then change when it changes, right? Hard to do, right? Exhausting. But I guess like what I'm starting to see, I don't know how much you guys have gotten involved in this. So it's almost like going back to the old days where it's like, I need to use these properties as early lead gen for my properties, right? So like, I got to convert these people down to my newsletter, or I guess it could be your website or my podcast or something I own.
I'm seeing that trend. Yeah. And I think Alan, I think if listeners get anything out of this, I think that's a really good insight that, it's not like I'm saying like run away, leave the algorithms, like they do have value. I'm really active on LinkedIn, and maybe we're having this conversation because of something I did on LinkedIn or I did on a podcast, whatever, like I think it's really good for top of funnel still. But like conversion to a customer and then long-term value means you've got to build something that you own. And, I think all those examples you gave, newsletters, podcasts, anything, events, like we've done 2 years now of Catalyst, which is an owner operator event. It's bespoke and small, but really powerful. I'm really interested in creating a community around what I'm calling the O2 community, owner operator community. Because I think when you own and run something, your behavior is different than when you're a detached shareholder. And so I'm interested in gathering those people together because I think they think differently. Building community, the automation engineer I was talking about, we worked with him to brainstorm professional organization around automation engineering, which none existed. If you can believe that, none existed. And so we shaped one and people just like flocked into it. It started in Slack and then it went into the real world. And now it's becoming more and more and more. So he's like, he owns that, right? He owns that. So I think that building those kind of marketing assets, but they're often much more than I wouldn't say, oh, have your marketing person do it. It's like a business. It's a business strategy.
100%. And what I think I've been sort of looking at too is like you need to have multiple of these things. So like you're not going to convert everyone from your LinkedIn social or paid or whatever to one offer. You need to have like multiple offers and things that you're doing that all kind of, so it's like, great. Like you have a newsletter, you have an event, and like each one might be a different stage of the funnel where people are going deeper in more commitment with what you're up to and what you're about. and that's fine. You can have different levels. And this is, I think that there's something here that I haven't seen anybody fully articulate / do yet, where it's like, how do I visualize this whole ecosystem of what's happening, where I have social and organic social and stuff and paid out here, I'm converting to here, then I'm converting to here. And I guess it's, it's a little bit of a sales funnel type concept, but there's these new nuances in it where I have to create I have to use rented properties to build owned properties, and those owned properties then have to be used in a variety of different ways to make them worthwhile, right? Different kind of monetizations. So I think it's a fascinating new area.
I think the layer I would put on top of that, and I think you're absolutely right, is that also if you think about it like rings of a tree, maybe not like a funnel, but like rings of a tree, which is, that's our marketing from the inside out framework, but we'll apply it to this too. So the ecosystem of rented and awareness, and in which case the algorithm could be pretty good, because it suddenly will expose you to people that you wouldn't have otherwise. And then it's owned properties, and then it's a customer, somewhere in there. I think there's another layer on there that is digital to person. At least been my experience that you can convert people digitally to a certain level of commitment and belief in you. But like to get closer to being a customer, if you can bridge that physical gap, like I'm at an event with you or you're coming to this roundtable that we're hosting, I think that's an important component of this, because I think the pandemic was terrible for our business. It was so bad, because I realized in hindsight, we are a face-to-face business. Like people really trust me when we're in the room together. I can build a lot of trust with you in this environment, Alan, and people listening to it will be like, oh yeah, that Shawn guy, I like him. He seems like he's rational. But going from that to I spend $120,000, $240,000 a year with Kinesis, it requires another bridge. And maybe it corresponds to the dollar value you're asking for.
Well, I think it's exactly analogous to your thing about, hey, we're not going to work with e-commerce, right? Because a lot of and this is a really good point for me, and I've been exploring this whole thing about media and newsletters and what's happening and the changes in social. And what I think you're pointing out is that a lot of the newsletter stuff is based on people who are doing very low, they're either doing B2C, the offers they're converting to are very low dollar amount and not a huge amount of commitment. And so it's even if it's B2B, it's kind of like a B2C model. And that's most of the stuff you see out there. So I guess and I think you put a perfect thing on that. Like, that doesn't mean that the newsletter is wrong. It just means that, like, if you're going to go sell something that costs, $500,000 a year, you're not going to do it just on a newsletter conversion, right? You've got to build an ecosystem that brings it from the digital down to the personal, right? Like you said, I thought it was very well said. So,
this came from my experience with that automation engineer where, we built this whole like Slack for the community, and it was lots of engagement and everything. And then we went to an automation conference and we had like a happy hour, and he said to me, he's like, those conversations are much closer to doing business together than anything that was happening on the Slack channel. And I was like, yeah, I think that's really important to think about that.
Yeah. And I love this, like how you integrate it all into this sort of continuum or, circles versus like saying it's this way or it's that way, or you do this for that, it's more like, hey, you got to really start looking at the whole ecosystem of how you're interacting and all your different offers, and I would even probably try to find a better word for that. Like, at all your different points of interaction that take people deeper down in the relationship. Right. And, it's a really fascinating. So I think I'm going to be doing a bunch more podcasts, just trying to figure out exactly where this is going over time.
Yeah. That's fun. It's a fun conversation.
Well, Shawn, this has been awesome. Thanks. You taught me a few things about marketing today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to help,
And if people want to reach out, what are the best mechanisms for you?
Yeah, my email's Shawn@kinesis.team. I'm also really active on LinkedIn. So Shawn Busse.
SHAWN.
Yeah.
Shawn.
Yeah. At Kinesis, it's spelled Kinesis. But, just go to LinkedIn and type Shawn Busse and I'm there, shoot me a message or a connection request.
Right. Well, if you want to explore these ideas further and you're looking for a way to bring better employees to you, definitely reach out to Kinesis. Like I think you've hit on some real key themes that are important for at least for the small business owner.
Right on. I appreciate that, Alan. It means a lot.
All right. So thanks, Shawn. Have a good one.
Much. All right.
You've been listening to the Small Business Mentor podcast, brought to you by Alan Pence. For more insights on how to navigate your business through its black holes, visit @apence on X. Don't forget to search for Small Business Mentor in your podcast app to subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and here's to your next leap in business growth.